When I look back at the earliest years of my life, I often see a small child, full of questions, always holding a book or reaching for one. From the very beginning, there was something inside me that could not rest until it had found answers. The world seemed so large, and I felt so small within it, but books gave me a way to explore beyond my own surroundings. Whenever I turned the pages of a book, I found myself stepping into another place, meeting new ideas, and discovering how much more there was to learn. It was not enough for me to simply be told something. I wanted to know why it was so, how it worked, and what it meant. That hunger for understanding became my constant companion, and it shaped the person I would become. I remember wandering through the streets, always with my eyes open, noticing details that others might ignore. Why did the water move this way? Why did the sky change color? Why could a kite fly, or a candle melt, or a clock tick in steady rhythm? These were not questions I could simply set aside. I had to chase them down, and I found my greatest tools were curiosity and the written word. In those times, books were not as common as they are today, and each one felt like a treasure chest. I would borrow them whenever I could, trade for them, or even read by candlelight when I should have been sleeping. The more I read, the more questions arose, and the cycle of learning never ended. That eagerness sometimes puzzled those around me. They would ask, "Why do you spend so much time with books? Why do you not simply accept things as they are?" But to me, accepting without understanding felt like closing a door before knowing what was inside. Every new fact I uncovered seemed to lead to 3 more mysteries, and far from tiring me, it filled me with energy. I realized very young that knowledge was not something anyone could give fully. It was something one had to seek, piece by piece, through effort and determination. And so I kept seeking. There were days when my family could not provide all that I desired in terms of study, but even then I found ways to learn. I would listen closely when others spoke, repeat their words in my mind, and then go searching for answers in books or through experiments of my own. If I could not find a teacher to explain a subject, I made the book my teacher. If I did not have the book, I turned the world itself into my classroom. The river, the fire, the wind, the marketplace, all these became lessons waiting to be uncovered. That love for questions did not make my path easy. It required discipline, patience, and often sacrifice. Sometimes I had to give up play, sometimes sleep, sometimes even comfort, just to satisfy that hunger to know. Yet in every sacrifice I found reward. The moment a puzzle fit together in my mind, the joy was greater than any other amusement I might have had. Knowledge gave me confidence, and more importantly, it gave me a sense of purpose. I began to see that if I could continue to grow in understanding, perhaps I could also use that understanding to help others. Even in my youth, I noticed how learning could change not just one person, but many. A single idea, once understood and shared, could improve the lives of families, neighbors, and even strangers. This realization pushed me to read even more, to keep my mind open and active, because I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be more than just a boy with questions. I wanted to be a person with answers that mattered. And so, curiosity became my greatest gift. It was never satisfied, never silent, always urging me forward. Some may see it as restlessness, but I know it was the key that opened doors I never imagined. It was curiosity that gave me the courage to look beyond the ordinary and ask, what else can be done? What else can be learned? That question has followed me all my life, guiding me through every stage, reminding me that the search for knowledge is not a burden but a joy. It all began with a child who loved to read and ask questions, and that child never stopped. When I speak of beginnings, I do not speak of grand halls or fine schools. My path started in modest surroundings, where comfort was limited and opportunities did not come easily. I was not born into wealth or influence, and for many, that would have been reason enough to remain where they were placed in life. But I could not accept that my circumstances would define the limits of my future. The walls around me might have been plain, the tools in my hands simple, yet within me there was a strong belief that learning could build a new world. From the earliest days, work was a part of life. Duties were many, and time for study often seemed scarce, but I found that if a person has determination, even the busiest day leaves room for a small moment to learn. I carried books into corners where I could read in silence, used scraps of paper to practice writing, and saved every ounce of energy for the pursuit of growth. I understood quickly that knowledge was the only wealth that no one could take from me, and so I guarded it, treasured it, and worked tirelessly to gain more. There were moments of hardship when hunger or exhaustion made me question whether it was possible to go on. But in those moments, I reminded myself that progress is often born from struggle. What seemed like obstacles were, in truth, lessons in disguise. Every time I overcame a difficulty, I discovered a strength I had not known before. Humble beginnings may appear as weakness to the eye, but for me, they became the foundation of resilience. Without them, I might never have learned the value of persistence. I remember vividly how others sometimes underestimated me. They saw only a boy from an ordinary family, with no advantage or special favor. To them, it was unlikely that I would rise beyond the expectations of my station. Yet, I used that doubt as fuel. I decided that if no one believed in what I could become, I would simply have to prove it through action. Each lesson I mastered, each skill I gained, was a step upward, away from the narrow path set before me. And with each step, I felt the chains of limitation loosen just a little more. The journey towards self-improvement was not simply about books or study. It was about shaping character. I learned the worth of discipline, for without it, curiosity cannot bear fruit. I learned the necessity of honesty, because without truth, knowledge becomes useless. I learned the importance of hard work, for dreams remain dreams unless hands and heart are willing to labor for them. In every challenge, these lessons grew stronger, guiding me to become more than I had been the day before. There was also the joy of discovery, the kind that lifts the spirit even in the hardest of times. To realize that one could teach oneself, that one could rise above the limits of birth through sheer effort, was a revelation. The mind, once awakened, becomes restless in the best of ways, forever reaching for more. That restlessness carried me forward, even when the path was unclear, even when the way seemed blocked. I knew that progress might be slow, but progress was certain if I refused to give up. As I advanced in learning, I began to see that self-improvement is not selfish. When a person grows in wisdom and skill, that growth naturally spreads outward. What I learned did not remain only mine. It became something I could share. It gave me the ability to teach, to help, to create, and in doing so, to lift not just myself, but those around me. In this way, the journey from humble beginnings became more than a personal story. It became a path of service. It is easy to look at the end of a journey and imagine it was smooth, but the truth is always different. It is built on small, patient steps, taken again and again, often with no reward in sight. Yet each step matters, each effort counts, and over time they create a road that leads farther than anyone might expect. That is the true power of beginning humbly. It teaches you never to take progress for granted, and never to stop walking toward a higher purpose. I stand before you as proof that beginnings do not define endings, and that the smallest start can lead to the greatest change. All my life, I have carried with me the belief that knowledge should not rest in the mind alone. To me, true knowledge has always demanded action, a way of taking ideas and shaping them into something useful for the world around us. From the earliest days of my curiosity, I found myself not only asking questions, but also searching for ways to turn answers into practical discoveries. I did not wish simply to read about the wonders of the world. I wanted to add something to them, to take what I learned and mold it into inventions that could ease the burdens of daily life. The thought often occurred to me that if a small idea could bring comfort to a single household, then a greater idea, shared freely, could transform communities. With this in mind, I turned my attention to the ordinary details of life, for I believed that change begins not in far-off dreams, but in the simple matters of each day. I studied how light moved, how sound traveled, how tools could be improved, how resources could be used more wisely. My goal was never glory nor wealth, but usefulness. I asked myself again and again, what can be done to make life brighter, safer, or easier for those around me? When I held a kite against the stormy sky, I was not chasing amusement, but searching for understanding. The spark of electricity that danced along the string was more than a marvel. It was a key to unlocking mysteries of nature that could one day bring warmth, light, and progress into homes. What began as curiosity became knowledge, and that knowledge became a gift for others. To see in the crackle of energy the promise of an entire new age filled me with wonder, and yet I knew that such discoveries must be shared, not hidden. Invention for me was never about grandeur, but about solving real needs. I devised tools for printing so that words might spread more swiftly, because I believed an informed people are a strong people. I designed devices for safety so that work could be done without needless risk, for what good is progress if it comes at the cost of lives? I thought of musical instruments not because music was necessary for survival, but because joy is as vital to the spirit as food is to the body. In each creation, whether large or small, I felt that same spark of purpose, to make life more livable, more connected, more human. What pleased me most was that these ideas, once born, did not belong to me alone. I never sought to keep them locked away for profit or pride. Instead, I placed them into the hands of others, freely and gladly, because what use is an invention if it does not serve? To see neighbors benefit, to hear of improvements spreading from town to town was reward enough. For me, there was no higher joy than knowing that a thought from my mind, shaped by my hands, had found a place in the daily rhythm of ordinary people. As the years passed, I realized that ideas can travel farther than any one person. A discovery made in one corner of the world can inspire another in a distant land, and together those ideas can build bridges to futures unseen. It was never about a single breakthrough, but about creating a spirit of progress, a culture that welcomes new ideas rather than fears them. That, I believe, is the true power of invention, not merely the object itself, but the awakening it stirs in others. Looking back, I know that none of these achievements sprang from genius alone. They grew out of observation, patience, and an endless willingness to try, fail, and try again. A candle burns not because it wishes to, but because someone lights the wick. So it is with discoveries. They come to those who dare to strike the match of curiosity, who refuse to leave questions unanswered, and who persist long enough to transform a spark into a flame. Each invention, each idea, each discovery was not the end of the journey, but a step along it. They served as proof that curiosity, when combined with perseverance and a heart willing to serve others, can shape the very way people live. And it is for this reason that I say, with the deepest conviction, that discoveries, inventions, and ideas truly have the power to change daily life. From the earliest years, I came to understand that talent alone could not carry anyone far. Curiosity was the fire that fueled me, but discipline was the hand that kept that fire steady. Without structure, even the brightest ideas fade into nothing. I learned to rise early, to set tasks before myself, and to measure each day not by how much I dreamed, but by how much I accomplished. This was not always easy, and there were many times when I would have preferred leisure, but I knew that progress could not be built on idleness. Every page I read, every word I wrote, every experiment I carried out was possible because of the habits I built through discipline. Hard work became the natural companion of this discipline. There was no shortcut to understanding, no easy road to mastery. If I wanted to write clearly, I had to practice until my words carried weight. If I wanted to master a craft, I had to labor long hours at it, often failing before I succeeded. My hands grew tired, my eyes strained, but my spirit held firm because I knew that each effort brought me closer to improvement. I accepted that mistakes would come, but I welcomed them, for each mistake was a teacher. The true failure was not in stumbling, but in refusing to rise again. Hard work gave meaning to my goals because it proved that I was willing to sacrifice for them. Yet all of this, the discipline and the work, would have been hollow had it been for myself alone. I discovered that the greatest purpose of effort is service. A person may grow strong in knowledge and skill, but if that strength is not shared, it becomes a burden rather than a blessing. That is why I sought ways to use what I had learned for the good of those around me. I gave thought to the needs of my neighbors, to the safety of their homes, to the education of their children. If there was a problem that could be solved, I wanted to lend my mind and my hands to the solving of it. Service, I found, is the truest test of character. It requires patience, humility, and a willingness to put aside personal gain. There were times when I could have chosen a path of comfort, keeping my discoveries or my labor for myself. But I could not find peace in that. The satisfaction I felt in serving my community was far greater than any private reward. Whether it was helping to establish institutions of learning, organizing efforts to keep streets safe, or creating systems that brought people together, I gave myself to the work because I believed that the strength of one person is multiplied when shared with many. Of course, such service demanded even greater discipline. It is easy to think of oneself first, to rest when tired, to take pride in personal achievement, but to continue working for the sake of others, even when recognition is scarce, requires a steady hand and a clear heart. I did not always succeed in this perfectly, but I strove for it. I reminded myself often that true honor is not in being praised, but in knowing that one has left behind something better than was found. Hard work, too, took on new meaning when directed toward the community. A task that might have felt heavy when carried alone became lighter when I saw its effect on others. The hours of planning, the endless effort of organizing, the careful labor of building, all of it seemed worth, while when I witnessed lives improved because of it. Work is never truly hard when the heart is engaged, and the heart finds its greatest strength in service. Looking back, I see that these three strands, discipline, hard work, and service, are woven together like a single rope. Alone, each is strong, but together, they form something unbreakable. Discipline guides, hard work achieves, and service gives meaning. Without them, my journey would have been directionless, my achievements hollow, and my life without true purpose. And so I say with certainty, a life of discipline, hard work, and service to the community is a life worth living. When I reflect upon the years gone by, I find that the most enduring measure of a life is not in the possessions gathered or the honors received, but in the impressions left upon the minds and hearts of others. Knowledge once shared does not perish. It takes root and spreads far beyond what one person could ever imagine. What begins as a spark in a single mind has the power to become a flame that warms countless others. This, I believe, is the true meaning of legacy, not what remains in stone or paper, but what lives on in the thoughts and actions of those who continue the journey of learning. I never sought greatness for its own sake, but I sought to learn, and in learning, to serve. What surprises me still is how those efforts have echoed beyond my own time. A lesson once written, an idea once spoken, an invention once shared. They have carried themselves into new generations, teaching and inspiring people who I would never meet. In this way, I see that one life, however humble its beginnings, can create ripples that move outward like circles on water, touching distant shores. There are students across the world today who open a book or hear a story and find within it not only knowledge but courage. They see in the pages proof that discipline, curiosity, and perseverance can shape destiny. They learn that the limits of circumstance are not the limits of possibility. In that recognition, they find hope for themselves, and that hope is stronger than any hardship they may face. To know that my own struggles and triumphs can serve as a guiding light for others is a reward greater than any medal or monument. A legacy, to me, is not about being remembered. It is about continuing to be useful. If an invention still serves, if a principle still guides, if a word still encourages, then the work has not ended. I am humbled to think that people who live in lands I never visited, who speak languages I never spoke, are still touched by the lessons that grew from my small beginnings. It is as though knowledge itself refuses to be bound by time or place it travels. It evolves. It finds new homes in the hearts of learners. I often imagine a child in some quiet corner of the world, much like I once was, holding a book and asking questions. That child may never know my name, and it does not matter if they do. What matters is that the questions they ask are met with the courage to keep searching, and the belief that their search is worthwhile. If something I left behind encourages that child to continue, then I have fulfilled a purpose far greater than myself. The beauty of legacy is that it does not remain fixed. It grows with each generation. What I discovered may serve as a foundation, but others will build upon it, reaching higher, seeing farther, and creating things I could never have imagined. In this way, the story of knowledge never ends. Each learner becomes a teacher, each teacher inspires another learner, and the chain continues endlessly. To know that I am but one link in that unbroken chain fills me with both humility and joy. It is not perfection that inspires others, but persistence. I stumbled many times, I failed often, and I faced doubt from within and without. Yet I pressed forward, believing that progress was worth every fall. That is the lesson I hope continues to live on. Not that I was extraordinary, but that anyone with enough patience and determination can rise from ordinary beginnings to make a difference. If that truth continues to inspire learners, then my story has achieved all that I could ever hope for. And so I leave you with this. A legacy is not measured by how long it is remembered, but by how deeply it inspires those who come after. From the wonder of a curious child to the strength of discipline and service, my journey has been a path of learning and giving. Each discovery and idea was never for myself alone, but for the lives it could touch. If my story leaves you with anything, let it be the courage to keep learning and to use that knowledge for others.